Well, welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull. Sorry. Try that again. Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. Hello, Badger. Hello, Imperialism Bad. Como vai? I have to say, I second Badger's question. The name rings the absolute vaguest of bells. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you about another project that I'm working on, which is the Inessa Armand translation project. Inessa Armand was the first head of the Bolshevik women's section in the very first years of the Russian Revolution. Her work was suppressed by Stalin and never translated into English until I started doing it some months ago. So far, I have done, I've done 34 out of 36 extant essays of hers and speeches, and I will be doing I will be doing her letters as well after I finish the rest of the essays and speeches. All the draft translations that have been done so far are available as public posts here for anyone who's interested in checking them out. I'm trying to raise $8,500 total to cover the cost of translating and editing all of this. I have raised a little over $3,800 so far, and all contributions are very much appreciated. You can contribute by becoming a patron, or you can make a one-off donation here if you'd like to. And if you can't, I understand. These are shitty, difficult times. Signal boosting is also very much appreciated because nowhere near as many people have heard of this project as would probably be interested in it. Yeah, so what's the deal with Ethan Klein? I had actually been thinking that we might have a look at some Xanderhole. We haven't done him in a while. And he is definitely very much on his bullshit following the election. We've also got some Weed Lord that's been quite good lately. And Caleb the Muppet, who is explaining apparently that he is not against capitalism, but against imperialism, which is certainly a shift in his ostensible position. Hey, Riveroon, how you doing? And Adrien, how you doing? So, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Ethan Klein while we're deciding what to watch tonight. Imperialism Bad? I'm really not familiar with him. The name, I feel like I've heard it, but I don't know anything about the guy. So, from Xanderhole, we have anti-voting lefties have been real quiet since the election. Wow, no all caps in that. That's so weird. Then we have Assmongold and XQC are the average voter, and it's scary. Okay, that's where I would have heard the name. Then we have Xanderhole explaining what went fatally wrong with Harris's campaign. It will be easy to see how well, he avoids saying that maybe the genocide was actually not very popular. We've also got Caleb Muppet, not against capitalism, against imperialism. And I'm a Weed Lord asks, is Trump a fascist? 2 question marks. And Destiny wants to talk about hate towards men and the problem with DEI hire. So so we got a nice collection of bullshit. Any particular preference out of those? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you, River Rune, for clarifying that. That's okay. That is certainly an interesting move to make in the midst of all of this. I mean, I have to say, that's brave that's kind of brave, because at this point, to suddenly come out as, like, pro-genocide and be on the public record so everybody will remember that that's where you were on this? Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do that. That seems like one of those, like, bad ideas, but I guess Ethan Klein does Ethan Klein. Well, let me check that out a second. Okay, I see he's calling Hassan Piker a weaselly little liar. Who's Aiden Ross? There's another name that's vaguely familiar. So, what shall it be? He's definitely done stuff about Loserbox. But I don't know, maybe he did. I don't really pay attention to him because he just has gone in very dodgy directions, and it's really a pity because he did some things really Caleb, okay. Well, why don't we get started with some Caleb then? And let's see, where is it? Not against capitalism, against imperialism. So that's not exactly a coherent position, but okay. Go off, I guess.
That somebody decided to take a clip of me saying what I'm about to say for this whole stream and clip it and be like, they got me. He said he's not against capitalism.
Well, I mean, he obviously isn't. Oh, okay, 720p is the best it gets. So I'm gonna be looking at this guy like Like, my eyes are blurry the whole time. Okay, fun.
Aha! We got him. Well, I will own this. Because I am not in kindergarten anymore. When you are in kindergarten, what you learn to do is to point at things. You learn your numbers. That is the number 1.
I'm glad he's summarizing kindergarten for us. That's 2 things we know about his life, apparently. He found out about what goes on in kindergarten, and he went to a sandwich shop to work once.
2, that is the number 3. You learn your letters. That is the letter A. That is the letter B. You learn your
I think
colors.
we get the point.
That is purple. That is green. You learn your fruits. That's an apple. That's a banana. I am not in kindergarten anymore.
And we also know he is not in kindergarten anymore, chat. Just make a note of that. He is not in kindergarten anymore.
And my understanding of the world is not based on walking around going, that is capitalism. That is feudalism. That is socialism. And if I still thought that way, and that was the level of political development I would have, I would never have accomplished anything.
I mean, I haven't seen any sign that he ever attained that level of political development, but okay.
In this world. But I have accomplished a darn lot. And I've built an organization, and I've traveled the world, and I have stood up for anti-imperialism because I have a deeper understanding. So what is capitalism?
Okay, this should be interesting.
Well, to me...
Because he has, like, claimed to be a communist a fair bit. I mean, he's not one. I think that's also, like, pretty obvious. But he has claimed to be.
And to people that are part of the general scientific Marxist community, capitalism is a mode of production in which profit is the driving force. Now that is what
that all he's gonna say about it?
It means to me, and that is the phase of history that we are currently in. However, to many people around the world, capitalism means something different. Capitalism means starting their own business. Capitalism means having an idea.
Capitalism means having an idea? Chat, is thinking capitalism?
Capitalism means being able to not have a boss.
Wait a second. What the fuck did he just say?
Means being able to not have a boss.
So capitalism is where you don't have a boss. Okay, see, I would have thought that capitalism is where most people, something that those of us who finished kindergarten and actually learned more than just like what happens in kindergarten, would call the working class, the proletariat, are stuck having bosses. Because the only way to not have a boss of some kind or other is if you've got so much money that you can just live off of the proceeds of owning it. But okay, go ahead.
An employer, but rather having your own business, having your own domain.
So, exploiting people.
Where you can be creative.
And your workers can't.
Work to achieve something. To provide for your family, to build something new. And in fact, you'll often get people...
What's with the way he buttons this fucking shirt?
Saying, we don't live in real capitalism anymore, right?
Oh god, is he gonna do a corporatism?
Don't live in real capitalism, they say. And why do they say this?
Because probably they're right libertarians and they want to pretend that their, like, real smart boy version of capitalism would be so much better.
Because nowadays, in America, very few people have their own business where they prosper.
Wait, that's how you know that we don't live in capitalism is that most people work for a living. See, I wonder, chat, I mean, I have to say, what if Marx, imagine if Marx had realized that that was coming. That, one day there would be very few people who have their own business, and it would be almost everybody working for those very few people.
In fact, and even those who do, they're crippled in debt to big banks, and they are facing extreme regulations written by the ultra-rich to try and put them out of business. And they're dealing with people in neighborhoods that can't afford to buy their products. And
yeah, including the people who work for them.
When it really gets down to it.
So, wow, he is, I mean, it's like how the, sort of orthodox Marxist take on fascism is that it is a petty bourgeois ideology. And here he is championing the petty bourgeoisie.
What many Americans think of as capitalism, of people going out and being creative and starting their own business and innovating.
Except it's generally not the people who have the business who are doing the innovating. It's usually the people working for them, is the thing.
The only place that you will find that in the world today,
as opposed to outside of the world,
is in socialist countries.
Wow, he just accidentally... he's just doing a state cap... I see, I thought he was about to say we're in corporatism. And no, he didn't. Instead, he's saying the Marxist-Leninist countries aren't really socialist, they're actually capitalist, but actually that's good.
The place that capitalism, as many Americans understand it, is really in existence is China, Russia, Vietnam.
Well, yeah, Russia isn't Russia doesn't even claim to be a socialist country.
Nicaragua. The place that you will find the flourishing capitalism of entrepreneurship, people working hard, people having their own ideas.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind that those are separate categories. You have the entrepreneurship, and then you have the people who are working hard and having ideas.
A government that facilitates that. The place you will find that is in 21st century socialist countries. In China, their system...
Well, and Russia, you also said. Although, actually, you know what really sucks in Russia is being a worker. Kind of like it sucks here, actually. Kind of like it sort of sucks in most places to some degree or other. Some places less than others.
System is called socialism with Chinese characteristics. And if you go there, there are many different people who started their own company, started their own business, innovated, and been creative. And if you go to the socialist country of Nicaragua, led by the Sandinistas,
also not particularly socialist, like kind of social democratic, I guess you could say.
The thing that they will brag about endlessly is their micro-entrepreneurship program, where the socialist government loans money.
Well, this is just neoliberalism, though. The whole micro-entrepreneurship thing was the idea is that you're giving these you're giving these micro loans to poor people. And the idea, you know, the theory of it is supposedly then they're going to start a flourishing business. But really, that doesn't happen because these microloans are way too micro in order to actually be able to do that. So what they're actually doing is, like, just giving them loans that are technically micro, but not really micro by their standards, and now they're in debt. Apparently, he does think small business is socialism.
Money to people to start their own business. And many of the businesses that they've started are cooperative businesses where the worker and...
This motherfucker has spent the past, 5 years saying BreadTube is a CIA op because all they want is worker co-ops in capitalism. And now here he is saying Nicaragua is socialist because people go in debt to form worker co-ops within capitalism.
And the employer are, the workers are the employers. They are the owners of the business. And in fact, I believe there's over 5,000 workers.
Okay, the people who are watching this live, do they not realize that he's been slagging off the idea of, like, worker co-ops in capitalism? I mean, not wrongly. I mean, what was wrong about what he said is this idea that that's what, all of the amorphous blob that is BreadTube wants. I mean, that's what's wrong about that. But now, but now that is the pinnacle of socialist achievement
that have been started by the socialist government of Nicaragua. In Vietnam, almost every citizen, to some degree or other, the majority of the population are business owners and have their own enterprise. And in fact, the Vietnamese government, as part of their socialist-oriented market economy, goes out of its way to train people to become business owners, to develop their own enterprises. And if that's what capitalism means to you, it means having your own business. It means...
Well, yeah, but let's talk about that. I mean, I love the abstraction here, because we're supposed to forget what goes into that. We're supposed to forget that, you know, there are workers involved. There are fucking competitive pressures involved that basically mean that you're going to be screwing with the workers. There's a whole, like, I mean, this motherfucker came up with the most convoluted and, like, inaccurate equation to explain the generation of surplus value. And now he's sitting here talking about, you know, these places are socialist because you can generate surplus value.
Means being your own boss. We are not against that. And in fact, the only way we can get it is by defeating the power of the big monopolies. This is just monopolies.
I mean, he's just moving so much in the direction. I mean, this is wild. Because this is literally like the classic sort of fascist sales pitch to the petty bourgeoisie.
Facilitated by the American government that are the greatest barrier to innovation and creativity and economic growth.
Is his shirt like misbuttoned? Did he skip a hole or what the fuck's going on there? That is really bothering me.
Growth around the world. But you will not defeat the big monopolies by sitting back and deregulating everything.
You were just talking about how regulations suck a second ago.
In order to defeat the big monopolies, you are going to need a government of action that fights for working families. You are going...
Oh god, he is still trying to make that shitty ass slogan happen.
Going to need an anti-monopoly government. A government...
Okay, for anyone who's wondering where this anti-monopoly government, anti-monopoly coalition comes in, I was the first time I saw him talking about that, I was sure that came from someplace, that because nothing he says is his own fucking idea. Like, literally nothing he says is something that he came up with. He's always quote mining from somebody who usually does not actually acknowledge. I believe there's a word for that. But so this whole anti-monopoly coalition shit, that was a failed strategy of the Communist Party of the USA back in the 1970s.
Government that fights in the interests of the people and fights for economic growth. You're going to need an anti-monopoly.
No está hablando incluso... mira el título. Dice, no contra el capitalismo, sino contra el imperialismo. Que, bueno, también se dirige contra, bueno, la coherencia, la consecuencia. Pero antes, por lo menos de la boca para afuera, decía oponerse al capitalismo. Pero ahora está diciendo, no, nunca me he opuesto al capitalismo, weón.
monopoly state. And in the countries that I'm describing, like China, like Vietnam, like Nicaragua, like Russia, they have a government that comes out of popular struggles, that smashes the power.
The Russian government does not come out of popular struggles. I mean, if anything, the Russian government came out of the shitstorm of the 1990s. But, I mean, popular struggles? No, not really.
Of big monopolies, and then uses popular power to pave the roads, to build power plants, to provide services, and to loan money to facilitate the growth of the market.
So, Keynesianism, basically.
It is only in countries where popular power has broken the power of the big monopolies, the ultra-rich.
Yeah, I mean, if there are two places where you don't find any ultra-rich people, it's Russia and fucking China. I mean...
It is only there that you see a flourishing of what many Americans consider to be real capitalism or genuine capitalism. It is only by getting away from a system where profit...
I mean, both of the main countries he's talking about have some huge, like, oligopolies. I mean, Gazprom
are in command, and profits have total control, and creating a government of action,
whatever the fuck that is,
based on a democratic upsurge of participation among the population.
Participation in what?
That you can have, in our time, a flourishing market.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's totally what we want, a flourishing market. You know, like Milton Friedman wanted.
So-called real capitalism is only possible if you have a popular state that defends it and controls the economy, to make sure that no big monopolies can emerge, to make sure...
Except capitalism inherently tends towards concentration and monopoly formation. I feel like I read that somewhere. Like, what in the fuck even is this?
That the needs of society come first and the economy is directed, and the irrationality of the market is not in command.
You just described this as a flourishing market. The irrationality of the market is very much in command.
Now, this is an oddly nuanced way of understanding this.
Yeah, oddly nuanced. That's an interesting way of putting it. I love it when people describe their own take as oddly nuanced. I mean, this is just some bullshit that you'd hear at, like, the DSA, or, like, I mean...
But it's an important one to understand, and I will explain why. Now, I'm going to start
yeah, I'd love to hear this.
The history of the capitalist mode of production, and then from there, I will go over the rise of anti-imperialism and 21st century socialism, and we will understand everything, because
I can't wait. We're going to understand everything, chat. Finally, we're going to get to understand everything like Caleb Muppet does.
Understand this, right? You're missing the boat. And there's a lot of people that are missing the boat nowadays. Hold on.
He has to get up to catch the boat.
Hold on.
Holding on.
I have to get out the notepad, and I'm going to have to write it all down. First things first.
Why do I care if he writes it all down? Like, are we not going to get to see him write it all down? I mean, why doesn't he get that dry erase board he used in one of those CPI talks? The one that he actually just taped pieces of paper to, rather than, like, writing on it?
Right? The capitalist mode of production that we live under has gone through 4 distinct stages, right? Prior to capitalism, we had feudalism. Prior to feudalism, we had slavery. And prior to slavery, we had hunter-gatherer civilization. But capitalism emerged as feudalism was being overthrown. And the first stage of capitalism was what's called primitive accumulation. Primitive accumulation.
Like, what's the point of writing this down? We can't see it.
The first stage of capitalism was primitive accumulation.
This is what he's gonna do the whole time.
And primitive accumulation was when the feudal commons were turned into private property.
Also, it's worth noting, I mean, this idea that, I mean, what has previously been translated as primitive accumulation, but the term in German is ursprüngliche Akkumulation. You could also translate that as original accumulation, which has the advantage. I've heard people critique the use of the word primitive because of, like, some racist connotations that it has, and as it's currently understood. So you could also say, like, original or originary accumulation. You'd be just as right. I mean, they don't use the word primitiv in German in this. What Marx said was ursprüngliche Akkumulation. Ursprünglich is original.
It was when the feudal system.
But the thing about primitive or originary accumulation is it doesn't just happen once. Like, what they're doing in the West Bank right now, like, actually what they're doing, part of what Israel is trying to do in Gaza, or at least what they're mollifying the public there by claiming that they're gonna do in Gaza, is a form of original accumulation. In that what they're doing is what they claim they're gonna do, if they somehow manage to, like, beat the Qassam brigades, which does not look like it's going to happen, and they are allowed to, like, kill everybody, which, I mean, really, over our dead bodies, we ought to be saying, since they don't have air power without the U.S., and those missiles and bombs and stuff travel over roads through our towns and stuff. There are things we can do, but part of that is a form of primitive accumulation. What they claim that they're gonna do after they supposedly defeat the Qassam brigades and all that stuff, and exterminate the entire population, is to make all of this commons, make all of this previously inaccessible land and resources available for exploitation by the Zionist regime, by, like, citizens of the Zionist regime. I mean, this sort of accumulation happens, like, on an ongoing basis in different places. This is, I mean, part of what imperialism is like, basically sort of a reboot of original or primitive accumulation in other places. Let's see if he points this out.
Everything is more or less owned by the king or by the nobility. It was turned into a system where production was organized for profit. The land was turned into private property. Peasants who used to have a guaranteed spot on the land, as long as they did their work, they were suddenly told that if they couldn't pay rents, they were kicked off their land. And there was a mass period of execution for the crime of being homeless. Vagabonds were executed.
I mean, yeah, that must be so. I mean, can you even imagine, like, it being criminalized to not have a house? Like, wouldn't it be so weird if, say, the governor of a major, one of the most populous states in the U.S. decided it would make a really good photo op for him to show up personally, like, stealing unhoused people's shit and chucking it into bins while they get arrested for being unhoused.
By the thousands in England during the reign of King Henry VIII as they were clearing out the feudal commons. The Scottish Highlands were cleared out. The Highland clearances that followed the defeat of the Jacobite uprising were genocidal as thousands of Scottish people were removed from the land.
And now, if you're located in Scotland and you Google Highland clearances, one of the first results, there's actually a removalist company, movers, called Highland Clearances.
Killed, were, fled to the urban centers to be worked to death in sweatshops, or fled to the United States.
One of the things that they also did was they were used to colonize the north of Ireland. The idea was you had like this surplus proletarianized population, and you had a restive colonized population over in Ireland. So they sent a whole lot of Scottish people over to northeast Ulster to and just like gave them land. So in sort of the first draft of Zionism,
the clearing of the Scottish Highlands. Capitalism began with mass theft.
It continues with mass theft, though.
A system of production organized for profit. Not just capitalism, but the people who rule the world today, the big monopolies, the big landowners.
Capitalists, I believe the word is.
They did not come by their wealth fair and square.
I mean, all he's doing right now, this is just really just a regurgitation of Marx and Engels on the phases of socioeconomic development leading up to capitalism. I mean, he hasn't really added anything of his own to this, except now he's switching over and he's doing that Fash thing where instead of just talking about capitalists and the capitalist class and everything like that, it's the banks, it's the monopolies. It's not not capitalism in general that's the problem. It's certain capitalists who happen to have certain racialized associations a lot of the time.
And this is a really important thing that gets glossed over. We are often told that, Bill Gates and the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies and the Rothschilds and all these folks.
Oh, he had to mention them.
Worked so hard for what they have, and why should we resent them because they just worked hard for what they have? No,
you're the one saying you're not against capitalism. Why are you saying you do resent them? Make it make sense, Caleb. You're making the case against capitalism right now, at the same time as you're saying, well, that isn't real capitalism, because real capitalism is when small business is, or something.
They did not work hard for what they had. It was handed to them. There was a mass episode of theft called primitive accumulation.
It's not one episode, you dickhead. Considering that we're talking about people, in various cases, like the Rockefellers, for example, amongst others, whose wealth actually comes from the colonization of Turtle Island, which happened well after the primitive accumulation in the in the European imperial core, as it then was. This is just an example of how that is not a single episode. It's something that keeps on happening.
Of the profit-centered economy. And primitive accumulation began with mass theft, first of the property in Europe, and then the colonization of Africa and of the Americas and of Asia, the seizure of land, and the slaughter of indigenous peoples.
So, not just one episode.
And then from there, you had the transcontinental slave trade. And if you look, how was the land after they seized?
It's not called the transcontinental slave trade. They didn't do it across a continent. It's the transatlantic slave trade. Transcontinental is if they were being, like, abducted from one side of Africa and then taken to the other.
Seized the land from the Native Americans in the United States. How was it fair? Was it fairly divided up, even among the white people? Of course not. Of course not. The big railroad companies got it all. The big banks and trusts got it all. Capitalism, the modern world economy, came into existence with a mass episode of theft.
You're supposed to be explaining to us why we shouldn't be against it, Caleb. You're not really doing that.
They stole it from the peasantry and the feudal commons. They stole it from the indigenous people. They stole it from the Africans. They stole it from the Asians. Mass theft is how our modern world was created.
Oh, thank you for showing us that again. That really adds so much insight.
Richest of the rich. The ultra monopolies. The imperial.
Can you be an ultra monopoly? It seems to me monopoly is a kind of not a question of degree. It's kind of a binary thing. Either you're the only seller in your segment of the market, or there are others, and then you're not a monopoly. At most, you might be an oligopoly, part of an oligopoly.
Imperialists, the billionaire elite that dominate the world today, they trace their wealth back to primitive accumulation. They trace their wealth back to the clearing of the commons, to the seizure of the land, the New England aristocracy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's worth noting, since he keeps on mentioning Russia, that the billionaires in Russia trace their wealth, which is jealously guarded by the government there, to the plunder of Soviet industry in the 1990s.
The Eastern establishment, the old money, right? What is one of the most important programs where they vet and find future leaders of this country? It's the Rhodes Scholar Program. Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. Rachel
named after Cecil Rhodes, a noted white supremacist.
Maddow was a Rhodes Scholar. You look through the elite of the United States, many of them were what they call Rhodes Scholars.
All right, maybe you could say it a little bit more slowly next time, because I think some of us might not have gotten that. Is it Rhodes Scholars?
Where does the Rhodes Scholar Program come from? Well, it comes from primitive accumulation.
Is this what he's just going to do? He's going to point at things and say, this comes from primitive accumulation? Is that what we're going to do? This is a 53-minute video, chat. Is he just going to be, like, pointing at shit going, that, you know where that comes from? Primitive accumulation.
A very, very wealthy colonizer, a British man named Cecil Rhodes,
Cecil,
went out and seized a big chunk of Africa for himself and killed thousands.
Well, not so much entirely for himself as for the British Empire. But yeah, he did profit heavily from it.
Thousands and thousands of black Africans. And this big chunk of Africa that he seized for himself, he called Rhodesia. And he made billions and billions of dollars. And when he
he's doing Carl Sagan now.
Died, he set up in his estate a scholarship program to find elite people that would be useful in promoting the ideals of the British Empire. Cecil Rhodes,
Cecil,
the great colonizer, he was not a self-made man. He was not a creator. He was not an innovator. He was a thief. He stole a big chunk of land. He went to Africa and with machine guns sent an army of people to go with machine guns and kill whole villages of African people. And he set up an entire country, Rhodesia, where black people had no rights, where only his crew of white settlers had any had any say and had any authority.
What the fuck's he doing this to his camera? And let's just remember the title of this video we're watching is not against capitalism. Like, he's giving us all sorts of reasons to be not against capitalism. You might even say against capitalism. Like, how is he ever going to try to bring this home, or are we just going to hear him give us like a summary of?
And that is where his wealth came from. Cecil Rhodes, the founder of the Rhodes Scholarship Program, one of the most important figures in the British economy and the British Empire that emerged, was not an innovator. He was a thief who
No shit.
acquired his wealth through primitive...
Fucking hell. Is he just gonna keep showing us this? He's so proud of his fucking handwriting.
accumulation. And that was the first stage
Cecil.
of the capitalist mode of production, was primitive accumulation, the seizure of land, the seizure of raw materials. So don't ever believe that, oh, you know, the ultra-rich bankers, they just worked for it. Cecil Rhodes stole what he had.
Hay que tener en cuenta que este weón es más inconsecuente que la cresta. Lo que hace es recitar. Es recitar, weá, que cualquier marxista, cualquier anticapitalista que ha leído un poco podría recitar. Y luego va a dar una voltereta, va a dar una vueltita y tratar de conectar este recitado que está haciendo al punto de mierda que está intentando argumentar.
As the New England elite stole what they have. The railroad cartels that dominated the United States stole what they have.
I think you've made the point. I'm guessing. Okay. Did they do that with primitive accumulation? Do I have a notebook here? I have a notepad. Okay.
The oil monopolies, the Rockefellers, Standard Oil, they stole what they have.
Through Oh, you probably can't read that. This would be a much better joke. This would be a way better sight gag if you could actually see what I just was holding up, if my head weren't so small. It said, "We fucking get it."
Capitalism began with primitive accumulation, which was mass theft. But then from
Wow,
primitive accumulation,
I'm so glad. I mean, maybe you should say primitive accumulation a few 100,000 more times.
Industrial capitalism. And industrial capitalism was the second stage of the capitalist economy. And in industrial capitalism, you had factory owners and factory workers. You had workers being hired. And
yeah, I mean, and what you're describing is precisely the capital. You remember, Caleb, like just 10 minutes ago, you were talking about people who are innovators and entrepreneurs who are starting businesses or whatever the hell. That's literally what you're just talking about right there. And it all happens due to primitive accumulation, which is mass theft. I mean, which is true. I mean, I'm not, like, that's not what I'm clowning on him for, by any stretch of the imagination. but like he's the one who was just like talking about this like it was a fucking golden age.
The wage and working to produce products, and then those products
Hello,
be sold
Chaos Druid.
to make profits.
I think this is the first time I've seen you here. How'd you find us? Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is, if you've only just come in, let me just tell you the title of this video by Caleb Muppet, our very, very special ideological leader of the Creepy Pricks International, is Not Against Capitalism, Against Imperialism, exclamation mark. Yeah, oh, well, I guess he doesn't have the whiteboard handy. I mean, he decided he was going to use a prop for this, and he didn't think... I mean, this is just a crappy little webcam. He could face it anywhere.
And industrial capitalism was a great advance. We are not against it. It was a great advance. It brought us electric lights. It brought us steam engines. It brought us railway.
I mean, it sounds like maybe there were some things about it that sucked a little. I mean, you were just talking about, what was it? Primitive accumulation, I think?
It brought us cars. It was a great advance over what was there before.
And it was due to primitive accumulation. Come on, bring us home, Caleb.
But it also created a problem that had never existed before in history. And that was the problem.
The problem was that it created a problem. He is very clever.
Of poverty created by abundance. Right? If you're making a product, and say that product is a tire. Well, first you're going to need
He knew that he was going to be talking about this. He knew he wanted visual aids. And
materials for this.
Like, you have a desk in front of you. Why don't you write it down on there? Like, that is just such an awkward and, like, even painful to watch. Oh, is he gonna do his, like, shitty, inaccurate surplus value equation?
Tire. Alright? The rubber. The raw material.
Oh, Black Anarchist reacts! Sunjata! Yeah. I don't know, I don't actually know what happened with him. He, like, deleted all his videos. I haven't seen him in ages. His Twitter's gone, too. Hope he's okay. I loved his channel.
On top.
Here, since we're here, well, let me just drop you my Discord link. Where we can get together and talk through primitive accumulation. De eso estamos hablando, no Ariaguara. Si sabemos que este weón posee una pizarra acrílica, aunque no sabe ocuparla, ¿por qué ha decidido hacer este directo así?
Top of that, you're going to need to transport the tires to where they're being sold. So that's B, the shipping. On top of
Oh, he's doing this bullshit A, B, C, D, E thing. Oh, no, it's C1, C2. Because he couldn't, like, for some reason, I guess he decided, he noticed that, like, the cool academics will, like, have subscripts on some of their variables rather than just having a fucking separate variable. Like,
for that, you're going to need human labor power. Workers to assemble the tires. That's C. And, of course, the final the final price.
The channel is still there on YouTube, but last I checked, I didn't see any of his videos there. Which is really sad. I mean, his stuff was great. I love that.
Each tire is D. What's missing here?
I know he was going through some problems.
The owner of the industry, the industrial capitalist, has to make a profit. We can't change.
Oh, here we go. C2.
How much the rubber costs. It can't change how much the shipping costs. So in order for him to extract from the value put into making the tire, the only place he can extract value is from the labor power. So really, C divides into C1.
Here we go.
Which is what he pays to the workers, and C2, which is what he extracts as his profit. The profit of the employer is extracted from the labor performed by the worker. Now, this is the basis for people saying that capitalism is exploitive.
But you started out by saying you're not against that.
Because the worker is not paid the full value. He doesn't get the full value. That
Thank you, Adrien.
He puts C in, but he only gets paid C1. But that's not the point.
I mean, I would have thought that was kind of the point, because that is a big part of why capitalism sucks shit.
That's not the point. And people who talk about that and they say, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, and they're missing the point. That is not the fundamental problem.
Okay, I mean, for the worker, I would say it's probably a pretty fundamental problem. If you're getting paid less to make the thing than it would cost you to buy the number of things that you made.
The fundamental problem is this.
Yeah, I hope so too.
C1, which is what actually gets paid out, those are the wages, is always going to be less than D. The amount of wages paid out in the process of production is never enough to buy...
Like, this is the, Marx, I mean, if you're gonna just use, Marx's, account of where surplus value is generated, he actually had his own equation. And it was way better thought out than this thing.
Buy back the product that is produced. There is always more product created than there are wages paid out. And as a result, you will have a boom-bust cycle. You will always have this problem of the wages paid.
That isn't the only reason that there is a boom-bust cycle, though. That is a part of it.
Paid out in the process of production, never being able to buy the products that are created. But then it gets worse, right? So in order to make...
Oh, wait, have we got C3 now, too? Has he added an extra C? Wow.
more money, the capitalist is constantly trying to reduce the amount of wages he pays out. He wants to hire fewer workers, replace workers with machines, make workers who are there easier to replace so you can pay them less. So
no, well, I mean, or a very common method that he's not mentioning for some reason is increasing production quotas so workers are making more of the thing in the same amount of time while getting paid the same amount of money, despite the fact that they have actually generated a greater amount of revenue.
C, which is the amount of labor power involved in production, is constantly going down because of technological advancement. And that sounds great, right? But then there's a problem. Because C2, which is the profit the capitalist makes, is extracted from labor power. So if the amount of labor power that goes into every product...
And also, it's worth noting, there's the issue of you have to actually buy the new equipment. So that's an additional cost that also comes into it. And that tends to be more of a fixed cost, which means you also, again, have to screw over the workers a little bit more if you're going to continue making a profit despite it.
Constantly goes down the amount of profit that the capitalist makes in each product.
If I had to hear him prattle on, I mean, if I ever somehow found myself at a CPI meeting, first of all, I would be kicked out. Because Caleb actually, fun fact, wait, Sophic Manatee, are you also new? I feel like I haven't seen you here either, and I love your name. Like, a couple of years ago, Back when hardly anyone showed up to these streams, I was playing chess on stream. That's how long ago I did like a little game stream first. And in chat, in the middle of a live match I was playing, Caleb Muppet showed up in my chat to demand I immediately debate him. And I blocked him, and he tried to put me on blast. But fortunately, he did not know my Twitter account. But, yeah. So I have a feeling he probably does occasionally hate watch me. Well, welcome. Welcome. And if you're not already in the Discord...
product is constantly going down.
Like, hate watching me,
so
hate watching him.
To make up for the fact that he's making less and less of a percentage of profit on each product, the capitalist has to churn out even more products. And this constant problem of more products existing than there are wages paid out is a constant problem in capitalism.
And chaos druids.
Never before.
Welsh people,
had there been a system
basically.
where people were homeless because there were too many houses, where people are hungry because there is too much food.
Okay, this sounds like a great system not to be against. I can see why you've decided that you're not against it.
But capitalism, the capitalist mode of production, created a situation where for the first time people could be homeless because there were too many houses, where poverty was created by abundance, where...
Well, it's not so much... like, if there are people who are involved in building houses who are homeless, they might be homeless because of too many houses, but for most people, it's not so much that they're homeless because there are too many houses, as they are homeless in the setting of more houses than are actually needed.
You know, people lost their jobs and became homeless because too much wealth had been created. And I've talked on here many times about the coal miner's riddle. Right? The little boy says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" And the father says...
Is he going to write this down for us? The father says, primitive accumulation.
Because I can't afford any coal to heat the stove. And the little boy says, "Why can we not afford any coal to heat the stove?"
And
he says, "Because I lost it."
Apart from the really shitty equation that is also just very poorly thought out, this isn't even really his... none of this is his. I mean, this is just like regurgitated, simplified Marx.
My job at the coal mine. I was laid off. And he says, "Father, why did you lose your job at the coal mine?"
Because I was laid off.
Because there is too much coal. That had never existed before. And this problem of decreasing the amount of labor power resulting in an economic meltdown, that is completely new. Why should self-driving cars be a bad thing?
Because the technology is unsafe and unreliable, and they also they're environmentally unsound, and there's so many better methods of transport.
Self-driving cars should be great, but in a system where profit defines production, when the market and profits are given absolute control, that leads to a situation that we're in now, where if they implemented self-driving cars, you'd have millions of people out of work. What rational sense does it make for technological advancement and enhancing the human ability to create wealth and abundance, leading to more poverty? And that was the problem that came into existence with the rise of industrial capitalism.
Yeah, this is the real capitalism that he was talking about that was apparently so good.
Never before. And the boom-bust cycle was noted, where you would have economic crashes because too much wealth had been created, because there was a glut on the market.
Yeah, he never makes any sense.
Had been created. This had never happened before. That was industrial capitalism. However, industrial capitalism soon gave rise to imperialism. And imperialism was a whole new stage. Pretty soon, the industrialists, the factory owners, were usurped by the bankers.
That's not how that works. First of all, the bankers were already there. And second of all, what he's like leaving out here, see, instead, this is interesting because now we're getting like what could almost be called a Caleb original. Because if you read the like actual analysis of this, the point that is made is that there's competition amongst these industrialists, and some of them lose. And the ones who win get bigger and bigger and bigger and can obtain like monopoly monopoly power over the market, or oligopoly power. At the same time as they tap out their markets and their resources, and so they need to go find other markets and resources and everything. But no, that's right. It's just the bankers.
And there's some pretty big differences between a banker and an industrialist.
He started out by giving us a long description of what you do at kindergarten. I don't know if you were there for that, Sophic Manatee. But he literally started out by talking for like 5 whole fucking minutes about what happens at kindergarten. A thing that I think every single person watching this, at least I kind of hope, has already experienced.
An industrialist wants to sell as many products as he can, because that's how he makes money. And he wants the people of the country to be wealthy, because then they can buy his product. However, an imperialist, a banker makes money.
I mean, this is just fast shit. This is the traditional fascist approach to like diverting the critique of capitalism, because they don't want to talk about, because Hitler actually had a rhyming saying to express what he's talking about here. Schaffendes Kapital und raffendes Kapital. Capital that creates and capital that grabs. But the idea... Sorry. Throat is just dry and tickly. The idea was that you had the good industrial capitalists who were making things. Well, their workers were making things anyway. And then you had the bad bankers who were just taking things. And of course, that was the whole point of that was just to, sort of divert any critique of capitalism away from talking about capitalism itself, because the reality is capitalists don't make shit, no matter what kind of capitalist they are. And no matter how financialized your revenue stream is, at some point it does connect to actual production, actual things being made by actual workers, no matter what. Otherwise, it's not worth shit. That is precisely why capital was so keen, especially in the US, on ending any pretense of taking precautions about the pandemic that is now in its 6th year. Because suddenly you had a whole lot of people who were taking time off work, and since we have a system that sucks shit, they were not actually getting paid, despite the fact that literally it was not safe for them to be working, and all that. But yeah, so the thing is that actually tanked a lot of people's shares, because now there's no production tied to them.
Money lending money to people. So the poorer people are, the more they're going to have to borrow. So the more money that he makes. And when capitalism moved into its imperialistic stage, it no longer was promoting development. Industrial capitalism was all about development. They wanted more wealth and more productivity in society so they could make more money. But the rise of imperialism was about seizing captive markets.
Well, no. I mean, all capitalism, if you can get a captive market, the capitalists like that. But imperialism, particularly, in the earlier stages of it, in a particular place, is about gaining access to markets and resources that you hadn't previously had access to. Because in capitalism, getting in on the ground floor is where you make the real money. I mean, actually, there's an excellent example of that does a much better job of it. It wasn't even meant to be an attempt to explain capitalism. God, what is it? Dark Alliance. I have to remember this guy, Gary Webb's book, Dark Alliance, about the CIA crack connection in the 80s to overthrow the elected government of Nicaragua. He has this whole section talking about this guy who was, like, on the absolute ground floor of crack in LA. And he describes, like, the stages that all of this went through, because first, he had, like, more coke than he knew what to do with. And then, you know, he heard about, like, crack, which was a hell of a lot cheaper, and you could break it up and sell it for a way more. But then suddenly, of course, other capitalists in this particular market sector learned about this, and they were doing it too. So suddenly, the advantage of having this technology of crack making was no longer the profit explosion that it had started out as, and so you could either, like, this guy's Freeway Ricky Ross, I think his name was. We gotta check out the book, Dark Alliance. Dark Alliance. Gary Webb. Highly recommended. Very good book. So the options were either accept less returns on investment, or move out of retail sale altogether and become a wholesaler. And so he becomes a wholesaler, and there's this whole thing. Very well described. It wasn't even an attempt to explain the, like, cycle, the technological cycle within capitalism or anything like that, but it describes it really, really well. And the point is, whatever competitive advantage you get from being on the ground floor only lasts so long, which is why imperialism is actually so important for capitalists, because, like, for example, there are all sorts of investors. There's who are just, like, gritting their teeth, waiting for the time when they can start to get big into North Korea. Because that's a place where foreign capital has not been able to really touch. I mean, there are some, like, joint ventures. There's an Egyptian company that is responsible for their cell phone network in a joint venture with the DPRK. But in terms of actually being able to invest directly, nobody's doing that right now. And the result of that is, like, whoever's first to get in there sorry, will, like, make a fucking killing in many senses of the word. That is what imperialism is about. It's not just seizing captive
influence around the world.
Like, spheres of influence, were the mechanisms by which imperialists got a foothold. But the fundamental thing is labor, markets, resources, all of which had not previously been exploited, because that's where the real money can be made.
Big corporations and monopolies based in the Western countries began carving out the world among themselves and impoverishing it. And I'll talk about many great examples, right? When India was taken over by the British Empire.
Remember, this is a video where supposedly he's talking about how he's not against capitalism. He's doing a great job of explaining why you should be.
The people of India had these vast, elaborate looms they'd been weaving for thousands of years. So what did the British do? Well, the British went there and they burned the looms down.
But not before learning how to use them. Like, literally, what the British did with textiles, with shipbuilding, and with steel making in India was reverse engineer Indian technology, adapt their own industries to use it, since it was way more efficient than what they were doing, and then ban it.
forced the people of India to start buying their cloth from the British monopolies, the textile monopolies that were tied in with British banks. In Mexico, they've been growing their own food for thousands of years. But then, when NAFTA came in, Kraft and Monsanto set up shop, and the Mexican people had to start buying their food from American agribusiness.
Well, I mean, this is not exactly how that all works. I mean, yeah, that is the effect, but what he's sort of leaving out there, for reasons maybe he really doesn't understand this so well, he doesn't seem to understand many things very well. This camera is more focused on his fucking books than on his face. Is that this allowed the U.S. companies to massively undercut Mexican farmers on the Mexican market. Specifically, specifically to just wipe out, like, an entire population of small farmers.
The
and
Mexican
the
farming
and
sector
everything.
was completely wiped out. And now American agribusiness dominates Mexico. Nigeria, the people of Nigeria have a huge amount of oil, but yet they're very poor. Why? Because the oil of Nigeria is not run by Nigerian oil companies. It's run by Exxon.
Well, I mean, even if it were run by, like, the oil of the U.S. is run largely by U.S. oil companies, and not just the oil of the U.S., the oil of a whole lot of other countries. Are we seeing that money? No, fucking oil company owners are seeing that money. The investors in those companies are seeing that money. It's not enough that it's owned by an oil company that is like that is owned by capitalists from the same country as the place where the oil is extracted. That doesn't necessarily make a difference.
Shell, and Chevron. And there are many, many examples of this around the world. That imperialism is about holding back development and exporting the power of big monopolies. We're not talking about small stores owned by people that are creative. We're not talking about little
oh, here we go.
Restaurants. We're not talking about a hotel. We're not talking about somebody who has a nice idea,
I mean, I love how he's talking about, like, big business and small business as if they're differences of kind, when actually what happens in capitalism, if a small business is successful, is that it will end up becoming really, really big.
idea about a tech innovation. We're talking about huge monopolistic corporations tied in with banks, General Electric.
Everybody's tied in with fucking banks. Like, I mean, in capitalism, everybody is somehow tied in. You think small businesses aren't getting fucking loans? You think...
British Petroleum. HSBC Bank is basically what dominates British Petroleum. BP. ExxonMobil, which is basically Chase Bank. We're talking about huge multinationals like Amazon and Walmart. These huge mega corporations.
I'm so glad he's listing various big companies, because none of us have heard of any of this.
That have governments in their pocket. They go around the world preventing countries from developing, preventing people from having industrial...
Well, it's not preventing them from developing exactly. I mean, the idea... In fact, if he knew anything about any of this, rather than just sort of regurgitating stuff and making really bad mods to it, is what is called complementary development. In fact, I mean, in the very early post-war period in Washington, there was a classified planning document, their big Imperial Grand Strategy document. And they explained that certain parts of the world, you know, you had these big, you had these sort of hubs of the U.S. capitalist system, the hubs of U.S. imperialism, like Germany was one and Japan was one. But then they had what were called service areas in the document. Service areas were like Latin America and Africa and parts of Asia. And the whole point of the service areas was that their economies would develop, sort of, but not in a way that would compete with the global north, with the imperial core, or with these hubs like Japan or Germany, but in a way that complemented it. So they would not be, for example, creating their own manufacturing industry. They would stick to extractive and agricultural, development, so that they would export raw materials and crops and stuff like that, and the real money would be made back in the imperial core, turning that into finished goods. So it's not entirely preventing them from developing. That's not how that works. It's pushing that development in a very specific direction.
Real capitalism, preventing people from starting their own businesses, preventing Mexican...
Wait, they're not preventing people from starting their own businesses? There are plenty of fucking... this motherfucker, apart from the one time he went to Ecuador, he does not seem to have much grasp on, the countries he's talking about, because there's a lot of businesses that are started. It's just that they're complementary. They are essentially a comprador class. The ones that are at all successful are somehow mediating between US capital or Chinese capital and the local markets and resources and stuff like that.
From having their own farms, preventing people in India from weaving in their looms, preventing Nigerians from saying, hey, we've got a lot of oil here, let's start extracting it and selling it. They dominate with the export of capital. These huge multinational corporations spread their tentacles all over the world, and they keep the world poor. That's called imperialism. And that is the stage we're currently living in.
But as you pointed out, Caleb, that that isn't somehow a separate thing from capitalism. That is literally just the current form capitalism takes because of the conditions in which capitalism is operating. So it makes absolutely no sense. If you're saying you're not against capitalism, you're against imperialism, what you're talking about is that you're for the shittiness of, industrial capitalism in the early post-primitive accumulation stage, or what? None of that makes any fucking sense.
And is different. And when libertarians and conservatives say we want real capitalism back, what they want is they want to go backward from imperialism back to industrial capitalism. Well...
Wait, does he think there weren't any fucking banks in industrial capitalism? Does he think there's no industry in imperialism? God, make it make sense.
They're wrong, because industrial capitalism will eventually lead to monopolies, and those monopolies will get tied in with...
So, you started out by saying... you're refuting your own fucking point. Because he started out by saying, no, he's not really against capitalism. He's against imperialism. And now he's pointing out that, that industrial capitalism inevitably will lead to imperialism because that's just how the thing works. In which case, none of this made any fucking sense, and maybe he should have thought about this, and maybe thought about getting a dry erase board.
Big banks, and then they will become imperialists. This is the natural development. Just like primitive accumulation, eventually they seize all the territory and land, then they start factories. And then they start factories, they start producing products, and eventually that leads to the rise of monopolies, and those monopolies spread out all over the world. This is a process of development. This is the natural result of the system. Well, imperialism was a stage of development where America and Britain and France and Germany got very, very wealthy by keeping Africa poor, by keeping Asia poor, by keeping South America poor. But now we are living in a time where...
you're speaking of this in the past tense. South America is... if we're talking about the working class in South America, they are fucking poor. You're talking about, the working class in Africa, they're poor as fuck. And in much of Asia, same thing.
Where imperialism has been usurped by a new stage of development.
Has it?
We had primitive accumulation, Now we have
Postmative accumulation.
destructive accumulation. This is the new stage that we're living in. It's called the destructive accumulation.
And now I'm curious. I feel like I've heard that before. Destructive accumulation. The first result, chat, I can't believe it, is for destructive accumulation is a Yu-Gi-Oh fandom wiki.
We had the primitive accumulation to begin. That's just the seizure of material. We had industrialization. We have imperialism and the rise of the big monopolies. Now we live in the stage called destructive accumulation.
I thought you just got done saying we lived with an imperialism still going on, my dude.
Because really the only way the big monopolies make profit in our time is by destroying.
I mean, they still make stuff.
They destroy a country. And with the military-industrial complex, they made loads of money bombing and destroying it, and that competitors removed from the
Parece que sí. Yo no conozco Yu-Gi-Oh para nada, así que no tengo ni idea. Maybe next he's going to talk about the Naruto run of capitalism or something. But I notice it is time for me to start wrapping up. Thank you to everyone who joined in. It's great to see you as always, especially the new people. Always nice seeing new people here. Sophic Manatee and Chaos Druid. Hope to see you tomorrow too at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, where we will be resuming. And if you enjoy the stream, please like, subscribe, and if you would, and if you want to support the Inessa Armand translation project, you can do that. I'm going to drop 2 links in chat that will allow you to do that. I always very much appreciate it. You can also, where's that other link, to read, where the fuck is it? I always lose track of my windows. Here we go. If you want to read the speeches and essays of the Inessa Armand translation project, you can find the draft translations here. And I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time.